If there is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215, it's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt, and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom, Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl.
Well, howdy folks, how you doing? Hope you had a good weekend and things didn't go and get too exciting or hectic or all those other things. Of course, tonight is Magna Carta Learning Centre night, and it's like any good birthday. We're turning 21 and we are celebrating for it. Looking forward to hearing more about what's in episode 21. If you've looked at the description, you're going to find it may well be confronting to many of us. We shall see what happens. Of course, to help and guide us through it all, my good friend Fitzroy Sterling. How are you, mate?
Good evening, Carl. Lovely to be here. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. Things have been going sideways.
Yeah.
But, I am just looking here, and it says recording. It's saying, are we recording tonight or not? Because I haven't seen this notification before.
Yeah, I clicked a new button. It's about local recording, so it's recording at your end and mine, or it's recording
wonderful.
everything at the moment. So hopefully, if I disappear, because my connection is the problem, folks, not Fitz's. Yeah, my connection, for whatever reason, everything I own that can connect to the internet, including the piece of shit Netgear and the phone, are red hot. I mean, red hot. Can't run them for more than about 10 minutes. At the moment, I have the iPhone balanced on a can of drink, an icy cold can of drink, so that it can roll, the back of it can roll up and down the length of the can. And it's cooling the battery down and whatever else, electronics inside it and all that. So it seems to have stabilized, but I say that with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. We'll see what happens. So if it all falls to shit, folks, blame that. And please, God, help us fix this, because these connection issues are a real problem. And that'll be the dog who's going to get very excited, and I'll have to mute my microphone shortly and scream at the dog. That'll be fun. How about we got a big show tonight? So how about we get into it? How do you want to introduce tonight's show, Fitz?
Just before I do that, I just want to check who's here from Victoria, because we've had some of the most insane weather over the past 3 days that is just beyond belief. It went from sunny and fine to wind and rain, and it happened. If it rained, it had to be wind at the same time, and it would just switch between those two. It's just never happened that rapidly. Like, it would just be patches of each, and you just couldn't pick it. They just come in so fast and disappear as quickly as it came. So if anyone's from Victoria, let me know if you experienced that and whereabouts it was, because it was totally insane. And we just had like gale force winds about an hour and a half ago, and then they just stopped and it's totally quiet now. So I've never seen anything like it. And anyone who's been a guest here in Victoria, they're like, what's up with the weather? So even other people are noticing it. So something's really happening in the air this week, I reckon. I don't know what it is, but really strange. Anyway, back to tonight's show. What we're going to do is we're going to link why we did lesson 19, which is about competitive sports, lesson 20 all together tonight, and like the themes about opposition, about win and lose, scarcity, competition, and how that all culminates in violence, and why Article 61, how that's the remedy for all of that if it's understood properly and utilized to its full degree. So that's pretty much the purpose of what we're going to try and do tonight. We're going to show a little bit more depth of how we're mind programmed from birth. So we're going to get into that as well.
All right. Just want to acknowledge Archangel for Truth, who's joining us from America tonight. So thank you for popping by, and look forward to, having you stay till the end. That's always the big test, isn't it, Fitz? Staying till the end. Okay. Well, let's get into it then, starting off with our PowerPoint again tonight. and we're going to go back over hierarchy. Of course, we've explained this in many other lessons. Hieros or hieros is where the word comes from. That means filled with the divine or the holy. And archon equals ruler from the Greek. Hierarchia, I think we say that. Rule of the high priest. Sorry, say that again.
I think it's hierarchia. I'm not saying it perfectly.
Hierarchia. There you go. That'll make much more sense. Yeah, rule of high priest and rank to the sacred order. Yeah,
so just like as I said, we've used this in the last couple, just showing the link. That's why I've just put it there, how it's linked to the last two that we've done, 19 and 20. We're just going to elaborate on that in a different fashion tonight, that's all. But still, it's all interlinked.
Okay. Domination control. I've got to say, that's a hell of a graphic you've put together.
Well, thank you.
Right, just show me one who is dominated, and I'll show you one who seeks to dominate.
So that's basically, we are like a blank slate, so we behave the way that we're treated. And if you live in a domination hierarchy structure, without realizing it, you are going to do the same and use the same tactics because we're a blank slate, like I said, and we are influenced by our environment. And if our environment controls us, we'll seek to control everyone else as well. And there's two ways we do it. And we discussed a bit about it last week, and we're going to go back and show in more detail what that looks like this week.
All right. Domination control employs hierarchy structures, Greek for rank in the sacred order, to ensure the masses willfully deny their own needs for quality existence in order to serve the demands of the few. This is done through combining dependence on reward, hence fear of missing out, punishment, and manufactured scarcity, which initiates hostile competition, also known as me versus you and us versus them.
Yeah, so I guess I don't want to go too much on it because we've got so much to get through. But basically, the key words here are scarcity, me versus you, us versus them, hostile competition. You know, I just want to really draw people's attention to that and what it means to deny your own needs. And what happens when one denies our needs. We did cover that in the competitive sports one, and we're going to show that in other ways how it happens in the family dynamic, so how it starts off at birth. So I don't want to talk too much about it because we're going to have a lot more detail to cover, but I just wanted to draw people's attention to those words.
Satanism, from the Hebrew word hasitan, meaning one who is an adversary or in opposition to.
Yep, so like I said, the word here is opposition. It's a really key word. So just want to draw everyone's attention to that word because you're going to hear that being repeated over and over in the next things we're about to cover.
Sorry, just had to do a little dog re-education.
Sounded very distant there, Carl.
Yes, well, I just wanted to speak quietly to the dog there just for a bit. Right, moving on. We've got our first... oh, shit. Sorry about that, folks. Not much I can do about it.
He sounds like a slow learner, Carl.
Yes, takes after me, I guess I better say. Otherwise,
so in this video we're about to watch, it talks about that whole, you know, that how there's opposition, there's me versus you, us versus them, scarcity mentality, and how it sort of shows how that all comes about. So it's a really, really important one for people to pay attention. Now, before we go into it, I just want to say that if you've never watched any of the lessons before, if you've watched some here and there, it's really important that you actually go back and watch them over and over, especially the last three, and watch them multiple times because it's a quantum leap of knowledge that you are going to be uptaking. And so it's not that easy to grasp if it's your first time. So it is something you need to go back and take in bite-sized pieces. Let it sit and digest before you go and take on some new information because it is a massive amount of info. And it's too much for the organism to bear in one go, guys. So just letting you know, tonight's not going to be any different. So please go back over and watch it slowly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into our first video for the night.
And so here you are in your very first lessons of what it means to be me and not me. And so from a very, very early age, we start negotiating relationships. And then depending on what happens to us, we can learn certain things about the world. Most of us learn about domination. Most of us learn that those people who are bigger than you will make you do things you don't want to do, so you better watch out. That's the general lesson. I'll get back to that one later. There is a different lesson we could be learning, and that's the one I want to talk about. But before I go there, I want to talk a little bit more about, so here you are, you're two, so there's a sense of self, there's a sense of me, and the moment that I develop a me, there is a you. So there's a self and there's an other. And so we get this experience of me versus you, me versus the world. And we're in opposition to one another. And we grow up in the first story, the story of separation, being a story of only one of us can get our needs met. One of us will win. Either mom gets her needs met or I get my needs met. Either dad gets his way or I get my way. Either whatever attachment figure, caregiver I'm living with in whatever family structure I'm with, either they get it or I get it. So we develop a consciousness of either or, and we develop a competitiveness and a scarcity mentality. But then, in order to be safe, we start expanding our sense of me. So not only is it me isolated, but it's also, wait a minute, it's me and the people that I happen to live with. So whoever those people are, for ease of the metaphor today, we'll just call them the attachment unit or the family unit, which can look a lot of different ways. So now it's me as part of this unit of people, right? And then maybe we go to the Lake Harriet spiritual community on Sunday mornings, and so it's me and that group of people. So this is a community that I am a part of. So I start to find my tribe. So it's not just me, but I begin to experience myself as part of a tribe. And the moment that I start doing that as I develop, you ask each other, well, what school do you go to and what neighborhood do you live in and where were you born? And so we start to develop an expanded sense of identity where it's not only me as an individual, but it is me as part of the tribes with which I identify. And those can be ethnic, those can be racial, those can be cultural, those can be defined by the attachment systems that feel meaningful to us. Those can be ideologies that we subscribe to, beliefs that we hold. But we start to include in our sense of self, we expand our sense of self to start including those people who are like me. Those places where I get a sense of belonging.
Just want to check, Carl, because this is breaking up from my end. So I'm not sure if you got that as well. It just didn't play.
No.
It kept busting up. Just want to check in the chat, guys. Did you guys see that all the way through? So just want to see if I can get some comments in the chat, if they saw that all the way through or did it break through, because from my end, I saw little patches of it and then it just stopped and froze. So I'm just see if there's anyone coming through, because if we don't get that playing through clearly, everything we do after this won't make sense. So just if there's people in the chat who can hear us. Oh, it looks like everyone got it. So perfect. That's what I needed to know.
Good.
Yep. So just obviously my end doesn't like it. So that just talks about how from the very beginning, we're penetrated to believe there's an us and a them, there's a me and a you. And then there's an either or mentality, right? So those people who in the past have made comments about excellence can only exist through competition, that's how far back this starts. That's why they can't conceive another way of being, because it starts right from birth. That's how well that system penetrates into your consciousness right from the day you're born.
Right.
That's how brilliantly it's been designed. So that's what I wanted to highlight here. And everything that stems from the day you're born, if you take that on, accept it as a truth, then you're going to act that out with everything you do. And so when I talk about attachment units, we're going to start expanding that out of the family and think of what other kind of families there are. The police force, that's a kind of family. Armies, that's a kind of family. Football teams, there's a family. Like there's all different types of families. It doesn't just have to be your actual birth family, because the same kind of thinking and the same kind of patterns of behavior, they exist there and they just get repeated. but they start in the birth family and then they just get adapted out into all the other relationships we have.
Sure.
But if they start broken and defective, they're going to remain broken and defective unless we can catch it and understand it, and then we can work with it and adjust.
All right. Domination control structures create external dependence as a necessity for survival. Survival dependent upon power struggles ensures that the ego becomes overactive and chooses obedience and hostile competition over moral responsibility. Because survival is at stake, the ego will make sure that obedience and competition are accepted as natural. Therefore, the most intimate aspects of the psyche, inner educator, internalize the power over and under struggle as inherent in nature.
Yeah, so once you are trained from day one to that either your parent gets what they want or you get what you want, that is your entry level understanding of how the world works. And then your understanding of morality totally gets contorted and distorted. So we start believing that what's right and what's wrong is based on what an authority figure decides. It's because who's your first authority figure? It's your caregiver. And we'll see how that translates later. And where did that caregiver learn the way that they see the world? It had to come from, from somewhere, and it had to become some kind of thinking. Had to start that. So I'm just like scratching the surface here. We are going to go deeper to explain what that means, but just to sort of set that understanding.
So most people never take a stand when things get tough because they've spent their whole lives being told to just sit down and shut up.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about what school's there for, right? But not only that, we're told, through different types of so-called authority figures as well. Kids need to be seen, not heard. All that kind of stuff. That's been prevalent for who knows how long. And so these are the subtle messages we get as we, gravitate through the myriad of experiences that we have in a system that's based on limits and confinement. If you just want to really just see how badly we're controlled, just take a drive down the highway and see how many cameras you see. Go to an airport, see how many cameras you see. Like, just have a look in everyday life, just how many cameras you see. Like, it's in your face. And who knows what kind of things those cameras pick up and what kind of data they're going. But that's only an extension of what's already been there. The technology only gets appropriated by the mentality that's driving it. And so if the mentality wasn't there, that technology wouldn't be appropriated for that purpose. So we've got to think about what the underlying cause is of what's, driving that technology to be used like that. And so we need to understand where it all started.
Domination control. As infants, humans are completely dependent on their caregivers for every aspect of survival. Domination hierarchy structures ensure that caregivers are well trained to deny their life-serving needs, therefore will unconsciously insist the needs denied them are denied to their young. Thus, the cycle of trauma that splits families into me versus you and us versus them, it repeats uninhibited.
So, I mean, a quick example is if you grew up in a war-torn zone, right? It was not seen as you needed to be tough, right? So if you started expressing vulnerability and needs for tenderness and stuff, straight away you'd be admonished because that's not tough. You need to be hard, right? And so that you'll see that people who come from war-torn countries, they don't express their needs for tenderness and stuff. They actually admonish anyone who does. They actually pile down on them. And so you'll see a lot of gangs and stuff that come from those war-torn countries that you'll see roaming around here. Well, they come from that way of living where it's just harsh. Life is about kill or be killed, and they actually act that out. And they do that in their gangs, and they associate with others who are going to be just as savage as them, because life is about who's the stronger one, who's going to have the more force. That's the same thing. If you learn from infant, those who are stronger than you, they get to have their way, and you've just got to deal with it. And that's that prevailing mentality that we all live under. Gangs are just an extreme expression of that, and families are where they begin. and if there's families that have been living under stress and tension, where their lives have been on the line, they will obviously repeat those patterns. And that's just an extreme example. But now, there's softer versions of that as well. But we'll be here all night if I start getting into every single detail of that.
All right, well, let's move on. General principles of natural law, the principle of mentalism.
I'm only bringing that one up first, Carl. I just wanted to reiterate that first one because the others I'm not going to talk about tonight. Just mentalism. If we just go understand again that before anything can be created into reality, it has to be conceived in the mind first. So I just want to plant that seed of what that actually looks like, because we're about to go into how that seed gets planted, how those ideas get imprinted in the mind for people to act them out and make them a reality. So just wanted to focus on the principle of mentalism, and also show how, when we talk about the 1215 Magna Carta, and this is the Magna Carta Learning Center, if I just showed only things that are specific to the Constitution and we didn't understand how it's all linked to natural law, then a lot of information will be lost here. So even though a lot of people don't understand what's this got to do with Magna Carta 1215, Magna Carta 1215 is one aspect of natural law. So we can't ignore all the other aspects. So because all life is interconnected. So it's really important to understand how everything links in with everything. But at the premise of it is natural law. Just like if you get treated poorly, right, you are going to treat others poorly. Well, that's because of natural law. The laws of nature dictate that you repeat what's done to you. That's just the natural consequence of being treated poorly. That is a natural law. That's an understanding of natural law. So everything we do here always relates back to natural law. And Magna Carta is one aspect of it, but a very important one.
Very good. Language. Our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own, for we think in terms of languages and images we did not invent, but which were given to us by our society.
So if we swap that word out, society, by domination control structure, that will make more sense. So if you think about the language that you speak, right, the very first language you spoke was not the one you speak now. It was what people call baby talk. Well, if you take real careful attention, you pay attention to little infants when they speak, they repeat the same sounds. That means we are inherently capable of inventing our own way of expressing ourselves. We have that ability. And then we learn the language that our parents speak, right? But then we never look into, well, who created that language and who set the terms and the limits of the ideas that are expressed in that language. That's what never gets investigated. And if you don't understand how that's the basis of your input program, by which shapes the limits of what you believe, what you come to accept as truths, then you're never going to understand how control works. This is it. This is the software that you run from, right? The body's the hardware, the language is the software. And so that's why it's really important to understand how these systems work. This is thousands and thousands of years ago. The inception happened well before any of us even could think about it. Are you there, Carl?
I beg your pardon. Yes, I had my microphone muted. Sorry about that. Righto, moving on to our next slide. Our language is an imperfect instrument created by ancient and ignorant men. It's an animistic language that invites us to talk about stability and constraints and similarities and normal and kinds, about magical transformations, quick cures, simple problems, and final solutions.
So you think about the way that we speak about, the world. It's very absolute. It's an absolute way that we speak about it. Yet our world that we live in is actually fluid and evolving and ever changing. So our language, the way we've come to phrase what reality is in opposition to what is actually discoverable. So how do you get people to actually live in harmony with nature when they don't have an input program that actually reflects that which they can see? So that's when he says ignorant men, I actually challenge that. I actually would say, and I think he was the one who wrote this quote, I think he was being very careful because he didn't want to draw a pile of attention on himself. So he was very careful with how he structured his words so it wouldn't be revealing too much, and then he wouldn't be able to get his message out. That's just my personal suspicion. But that word ignorant, I would change that. I would change that to people who had a very specific agenda that they wanted to roll out. That makes a lot more sense to me as to why they'd create a language that's in opposition to reality. And so if you think about the way we speak about things, it's always through some level of there's a definite aspect to it. And life isn't definite. It's always changing. Carl, I'm noticing you're getting a few sex bots on here, mate. Have you seen that?
There you go. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
I'll see what I can do about fixing that.
Just because you didn't have enough to do. You just didn't have enough to do, so they thought they'd give you more to do.
Yeah. Wow, that was going well. Thanks, Sunflower, for your very kind sticker. I appreciate that. Righto, I'll keep an eye on the sex pods. And we will step along to our next video. No, not next video, next slide. Domination hierarchy control structures imprint self-hatred in children covertly via the input program language, which creates thinking that triggers the child to seek penitence. Language that intimates ideas of badness teaches children that repentance is a requirement for getting life-serving needs met.
So how often are we forced to say sorry? You think about it. It happens from childhood. And the only reason that you do that is because you know you're dependent on the one who's, insisting you must say sorry to get what you require. So you're doing it not because you actually are sorry. You're doing it because you're trying to get that which you require. And so if you start holding that over people, right, from very early, you are going to get infants that dominate others because they're going to learn pretty fast how this world works. And so these infants that get dominated end up becoming what? I bet you they become police officers. This is the thing that we got to start looking at, guys. They'll seek positions of authority. They'll go and become Catholic priests. They'll become anything where they have dominance over others. But it has to start at childhood. This is where the sickness and how it breeds. And if we don't understand where it starts, we will never change it, and we'll just keep repeating the same pain for ourselves.
Being that survival is the highest priority, the child's inner educator becomes adept at saying sorry for the purpose of buying forgiveness or approval from perceived external authority figures, while simultaneously feeling resentful for doing so, triggering a decline in the trust needed to build self-worth, self-respect, and self-love.
So if you're forced to do something you don't want to, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on something that you require, well, your goodwill for doing what you do and why you do it just dies, So you're never going to trust the individual who's forcing you to do something you don't want to. It's just like you think about when you're arrested by police for something they've invented, right? You stop trusting them as being people who are capable of making moral decisions, And so it's no different if the parent's doing that as well. And so then how's the child going to start building their capacity for self-worth if they're constantly acting in opposition to what they intuitively understand they require? It's not possible. So then they can't respect themselves or love themselves. So this has been torn away from them from day one. And I'm willing to bet that nearly everyone in this chat has gone through some experience of this, and not just here, but we're talking worldwide. If they're really brutally honest with themselves. And that's what it's going to require. Brutal honesty.
All right, and next video.
Yeah, so this is someone I really, really value. I've learnt a wealth of information from him. What's on offer here is going to be a quantum leap for most people. I don't imagine it's going to be very pleasant to hear. Yet, like I said, and I've been saying this from not the beginning, but for quite a while now, if we don't start looking in those dark cavities, that are hiding and do the inner deep reflection, nothing's going to change. We need to scoop out those wounds, and take a proper look at them. And then from there, we can decide what we do. But if we don't acknowledge it, we're going to remain stuck in those limits. Once we acknowledge it, only then can we surpass those limits that are upon us right now. So this is quite important to understand. And he explains the nature of violence, which is really important because a lot of people don't understand violence. And like I said, this is going to feel like a quantum leap for a lot of people. Yet if it is, go back and watch it over and over again, guys, because it is totally worth it.
Okay, there we go.
What is jackal language like? Jackal language, as I've mentioned, is a language of moralistic judgments. You think in terms of who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. And when you mention change, yes, we want change at times. So how do you get change in the jackal system? Watch a parent try to bring about change in the child. This is a parent teaching a young child say one of the most important words in jackal. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry. You're not really sorry. I can see it. You're not really sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I forgive you. Can you imagine a game like that? Can you imagine a parent responding to a child that way? And if a parent is going to do that to a child in their own family, what are they going to do to people from other cultures who behave in a way they don't appreciate? So, of course, you're going to have violence wherever you have this kind of thinking. In cultures that do not have this thinking, you don't see violence. So, that's how we got off target. Even though we could be playing the game, make life wonderful each moment, we have been educated for quite a while to play another game. Who's right?
Hey, so did that run through smoothly for you, Carl?
Yep, absolutely. Perfectly for me.
Just checking. Anyone in the chat, if you just let me know, did that go through smoothly? So what he says is cultures that don't employ that type of thinking, you don't see violence. That's a huge statement, guys. Now, that's why I put that first principle of natural law, principle of mentalism, up there. Because how does the thinking get into your mind? It's through the language. So
Absolutely.
all violence comes from the limitations of the way we think. And if we didn't create our language and we left it up to somebody else to create the limits of what the words, the symbols, what they symbolize and what they mean, we are not in charge of our own thoughts. So that's what I've been saying for a while now. You show me one who believes they're in charge of their own decisions, and I will show you a good slave, because that one will defend them to the death. They think they're in control, but they have no idea how they're being controlled, because it's done so subtly and from a long, long way away. They'd never see it coming. And if all the people who talk about, the matrix and how complicated it is, it goes way deeper than you could possibly understand. And this are just little snippets of how far it goes, guys.
All right, let's bring up this next bit. Domination hierarchy control structures use the attachment unit family dynamic to create to great effect. The adult plays dual roles. Within the kingdom of the family, the adult is the dominator, while simultaneously relegated to infant dependent on government dominator parent for survival and the quality of life within the kingdom of nation. Hence, the perpetual dualistic power struggle cycle of power over, power under carries on unabated. Dualism extinguishes the imagination from conceiving an alternative way of relating to one another. My God, that's a difficult piece of thing to read.
I'm going to try and unpack that in more basic language now.
Good.
So if you think about the family unit, we humans are incapable of taking care of any of our needs as soon as we're born, right? It's not like a baby giraffe. You see a baby giraffe, the mother gives birth to it. It gets to lay on the ground for a couple of seconds and the mum starts kicking it. And it's pretty much got to start getting up on its own legs. So it can do something for itself pretty quickly after birth. We can't. So what that means is that we're absolutely dependent 100%, if we're going to get any of our life-saving needs met, that it must come from an external figure, right? Which is your caregiver, could be your mum, could be some other attachment figure. But we are reliant on it. And because we are reliant on them and super dependent on them, we need to trust, because if we don't, we won't survive, that they are doing their best by us. Now, if there's something defective about what they're doing, if we, as an infant, were starting to recognize that there's something the matter with our caregiver, our capacity for survival would diminish and we probably wouldn't last. So we can't do that. So what we do is we invent a story that there's something defective about us as to why we're not lovable enough, as to why we're not getting our needs met. So that's an internal story that starts very early, as soon as we start getting denied our needs. We don't see it as defective in the parent because we're dependent on them for our survival. So if we start seeing there's something defective about the one that we're dependent on for our survival, we won't survive. So as a survival technique, we create a story that says there's something the matter with us. Now you take an infant that believes something that's the matter with it, and then they grow up. What are they going to do when they're older and have children? They're going to do the same thing. But now, what does a domination system do with government? It turns government into that dominating parent. So now the adult takes the role of the infant, and the government is its dominating parent. It uses the same tactics and techniques. It makes them dependent on government for its survival, just like an infant is dependent on its parents. So then there's a role switch, right? That's a very clever tactic that's done very subversively that most people never pick up. So it uses that dynamic that exists in nature that we can't change, right? And it inverts it and it uses it against us. And so while we live in a domination control structure, government is always going to be part of the problem. That has to be understood. So all those people who think that we can go into a new world and have corporations, etc., don't understand domination control, because a corporation is not there to help you live a quality life. It's there to what? Dominate and control you. That's the nature of a corporation. So you've got to really start thinking outside the box here, guys. We've got to see, the forest for the trees. If we don't, we're just going to keep repeating the same patterns. That's why I'm going into it this deeply, so we can really understand how it's worked. And I said, guys, it's a quantum leap, so you might have to go over this slowly.
Healing properties of truth. Lies and deception traumatize and burden the soul. Truth is eternal, and therefore it cannot be created nor destroyed. The soul seeks the truth because it's through truth acceptance that the soul heals. Hence the phrase, the truth will set you free.
Yeah, so I have actually been fortunate enough to have people contact me and actually tell me how much of an impact the knowledge they're getting from these lessons is having on their soul, and how free they're starting to feel because of it. And then I started getting an understanding of what's really at play here. Why are so many people drawn to truth? Why is it something that's so big that we can't help it but be drawn to it? And they started to show me that this is a way that we can heal. There's no other way that we can heal unless we accept truth. And those who refuse truth are always going to be traumatized. They're going to be burdened, you know what I mean? And they're never going to be able to move forward and expand and grow. Truth is the only path. There's no other way. And so this is why what I'm doing here is so critical. This is not about my opinions, guys. Everyone who keeps thinking this is my opinions, I've got some kind of agenda, it's just not. I don't like saying this stuff, but if we don't accept what's there, we can't actually do anything about it. So this is about the benefit for all of us, because unless we all unite around the truth, we're going to stay exactly where we are, and we're going to keep in the same mess forever. So it's about how serious you are about really understanding what truth is. And as ugly as it might be, it's there for your benefit.
So before the soul can heal, the initiator of the violence upon the soul must be neutralized. Corporate agents masquerading as government and their shadow must be brought to stand trial before we the people, and the self-executing contract that holds bad actors accountable must be fulfilled.
So that's the whole purpose of a constitution. It's to set the limits on those who are supposed to be acting in our service. And if you remember what we talked about last week, to act in service means that you take an oath. And why would you take an oath? Because it's a pledge. A pledge to do what? A pledge to stay within the constraints of universal morality, right? And that's what that contract is really about, and it's a self-executing one, right? If they are not holding to those terms and conditions of what is required to act in service, then they are held accountable. That's what the contract says, right? And Article 61 is that accountability factor. And if we don't use it, if we don't neutralize the whole structure that keeps traumatizing us, how are we ever going to get to a place where we can actually start healing? So we've got to get rid of that first. And there is only one contract in place that is going to do that. There is no other. And so that's how this all connects, guys. If you haven't understood it yet, I'm hoping this is going to help you. That's how everything's connected, natural law and 1215 Magna Carta.
The Constitution, a rule book for the state that is a one-sided contract that binds and constrains officers of the state, but not the people, other than to behave within the parameters deemed acceptable by the collective conscience of the community, as a means of preserving the traditions, customs, and rules the people already live by, so the people remain free within their natural state of natural justice.
So these are slides we've done before, and now I'm putting it in a different context, guys. So hopefully you'll be able to see the connection a little bit clearer as to what the Constitution's purpose and how it's really going to serve us, right? How it's going to draw a boundary and like a safe boundary around us so we can actually be safe to practice our freedoms, to practice our morality, right? That's what the Constitution's true nature is. Because if you think about it, it's meant to bind agents and officers to act within the constraints of universal morality. And if they don't, they have a special set of consequences waiting for them. Because if we don't have those special set of consequences waiting for them, we're going to invite the worst kind of people to come forward and take that position. And guess what? We've been living for the past thousands or so years. Those very same people have been attracted because there's been no enforcement of the Constitution. And until we do that, we're going to keep getting them.
Absolutely. Our next video. Do you want to set this one up?
Just let me check. Do you remember what the title of it is? Because I've just had a
Codified versus common law, I think it is.
Oh, yeah. So this is the one you did with Will, and he talks about the, like I said, like the stuff you did with Will is brilliant. Yet it just doesn't. It needs to have a little bit more clarity, and so these are really great opportunities to use what you've recorded with Will and just give it just that extra bit of clarity to really bring it to life. And because he's brought up some really, really important things. And this is just an opportunity to really expand on it so people can get a way better understanding of what he meant when he said these things. So, this is about the difference between codified law and common law. This is critical information.
Yes. How do we pick common law we're going to follow, or we're all going to push? Otherwise, we are simply going to tear each other's movement apart, and we'll achieve nothing. We'll remain where we are.
Well, the common law is really about principle. It's less about codifying specifics. It's about defining the principles of our governing system and our rule of law. Common law is about defining the fact that the jury is the supreme authority, and that's written into 1215 Magna Carta, as you know well. So common law is really about that higher form of law. And principles. It's not about codifying specifics, and that's a very good point. In fact, I think Fitz was very keen. He mentioned to me that he really wanted me to include that, and maybe that's why you asked me that question, Kyle. Is the concept of the bad man, as it were. The bad man in society, the immoral individual, prefers codified law because it causes them to be in a position of being able to see how they can get around it. Whereas the moral man is the one who actually prefers principle, and that's quite a deep concept. And in fact, I'm just trying to think who it was. I think it was it was an American judge. I'll think of the name maybe in a minute. But anyway, he was the one who coined this idea that I'm sure others have too, actually. But it's the bad man concept, the idea that the immoral individual very much prefers codified law, and will cause that law to be shaped much more. So common law is really about the principles, and it's about the fact that common law fundamental mechanism of trial by jury allows us to go on, in a sense, creating that common law. It's not necessarily in written form, but the decisions of juries, in a way, is more common law because it's in alignment with our consciences. I wouldn't say that common law is quite natural law. A lot of people sort of talk about the fact that it's the same thing. I don't think it is. Common law is an interpretation of natural law that is fundamentally built into the universe. And one would hope that that common law that we, those decisions that come out and are written in the principal documents of our Constitution, really are an expression of the way we want to live, and our consciences. And so, yeah, it's still a sort of a man-made law, but it's us. It's made by the people rather than government. Government-created law is the dangerous codified law that we've got to keep an eye on. So, yeah, so I don't think there's a danger. Once we focus on what common law is, we don't have to get all technical about it. It's really just making sure that the common law mechanisms are understood and are in place, which is trial by jury, understanding that the head of state has that mechanism and must, and by the way, they are required to enact that and to protect the liberties of the people. And if we fire this at the establishment noisily, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of people, and hopefully eventually thousands and thousands of people all making these points and asking bloody awkward questions to our establishment, I think it's game over for them. We've just got to be a stronger people and understand and care about our Constitution and do it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So so I wanted to try and see if I could explain it this way, and that is, if you imagine you have designs on robbing a bank, right? Now, if you just go and just walk in there without any kind of plan, just do things in the moment, what are the chances that you reckon you're going to get away with it without anyone knowing that was you? It's highly unlikely, right? But that's just acting in the moment. So if you want to be successful at robbing a bank, what you need to understand the boundaries, the limits, everything about that bank. You need to have time to really do your investigation, your research. So if you look at codified law is like your bank, right? It's something that has a boundary, has limits, and you're going to try now and place those limits down. That once you can see them, then you can see how you're going to work around them. And that's when you can be successful at the hustle. That's why the bad man or the immoral man seeks codified law, because there's a hustle in place as to why they've put these boundaries down. Where the moral man acts on principle. So they're not premeditating anything. They're just living their life. When we go into our day lives, we are constantly practicing common law. And when it goes well, we're having these smooth interactions, right? But we're not premeditating it. We're just going about our business. That's common law. That's always in place. It's only something that can be experienced. You cannot write common law down. It can only be experienced. This is what people don't understand. So all those people that you will hear say the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution gives us our common law do not understand common law, because that 1901 is codified law. That's the bad man's law. That's what they've used from day one to control you. That's the bank. That's them, plundering and harvesting. You are the bank, and they're plundering and harvesting you because they've defined you. They've defined your limits in that codified structure. And once they set the limits for you, they get to decide how to work within those limits to get the most out of you. That's why I really wanted to play that, so people could understand the difference between common law and codified law. Common law can only be experienced. Codified law is written down because that's the hustle. And only those who are immoral seek to write down laws. We can only make them through the expression of the jury. That's how they're made. Anything else is not common law.
A moral man's deterrent. Self-preservation is the highest aspiration for the immoral man. That's
so,
why.
Carl, you just want to bring that. Can you just bring that slide up, my friend, because it's not showing on screen.
Oh, let me hit that one. That's why the psychopath requires codified law, the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution, as it grants the time needed to plan and scheme their way through the artificial limits set in the artificial law created for the purpose of deceiving their fellow man into consenting to their own enslavement.
So pretty much what I said a moment ago, that's the whole thing. That's the whole trap, right?
Yeah.
They just put in a bunch of words that are, was very enticing and seductive, that were going to make people turn off their capacity for really thinking things through deeply, because they're going to be seduced by what they hear and what they see. And then that's enough for them, because, the masses don't think that deeply. We've covered that in previous lessons. There's only a small number of people who go into deep consideration. And the only place where that's available, where you're going to be forced into going into deep consideration, is in a system of trial by jury. So what doesn't exist in the 1901? Trial by jury. Because what? Yeah. Common law can only be experienced. That's why it doesn't exist in there. And so those people who think common law can be given to you by what's on paper are totally fooled. They just don't get it.
The intended purpose of Article 61 of Magna Carta 1215 was to act as a deterrent for immoral men, because the immoral man fears being exposed to the light and made accountable for their transgressions.
That's why they had to get rid of the trial by jury. That's why in 1688 they flipped, Parliament and made them sovereign over the monarch. Where the monarch is the people's representative. That's why it had to happen, and that's why they had to get trial by jury, get rid of it in the same stroke. Because if they didn't get rid of trial by jury, that piece of legislation never would have been passed, and all those politicians would have been brought before the people, and we know what would have happened to them, because the immoral man doesn't like being exposed to the light and made accountable. So if they knew that was the thing for them, they never would have tried it on. So this is how the deception always worked. They're always 10 steps ahead, guys.
Justice of law. Citizen juries educated and instructed to judge on the justice of law, legislation, and its enforcement can be relied upon to protect the people from the state when the state breaches correct behaviour in attempting to enforce injustices. It is for this reason that those who stand to gain money and or power from tyranny by the imposition of unjust laws or legislation regard genuine trial by jury as an obstacle to be undermined and destroyed.
So I just think that really backs up, everything that's been said really well and really concisely. It just talks about what the plan has been from day one and what they needed to get rid of and how they needed to do it in order for people to accept it. And it's worked beautifully, right? And there's only a small number of people who are awake to it. But if we don't start, putting this information out there, then there's no chance that anything's going to happen. So that's why the small voices like me and others, keep going, because the truth can't be extinguished. It's not possible. What we're waiting for is the others to understand it. If you go into these lessons, you need to go over and over until you do understand it.
The moral man. The moral man does not premeditate nor scheme, because the moral man lives in the moment, standing under the universal principles of morality. The moral man knows that laws cannot be written down, as laws can only be experienced.
Well, if you think about what a law is, it's something that's permanent and binding on all of us. That's the true nature of a law, and it's beyond our control. We can't change it. And so, for example, the laws of biology are that if you have a drink of water, your body's going to benefit from that. But if you have a drink of vodka, you're going to have an entirely different experience, because the way that what's in that vodka interacts with your cells, doesn't matter what your opinion is, it's still going to happen. Right? So that's a set of laws, right? So you can only experience that. Writing it down isn't going to change. If you write down your opinions, it isn't going to change what you experience, whatever you believe. Same thing if you go jump off a cliff, right? You might believe that you're going to levitate. You might write it down that you can levitate, but it isn't going to change the actual experience of what happens when you launch yourself off the cliff. So this is what I'm trying to show about how laws can only be experienced. I'm hoping that's really helping, guys, that so you can really see the difference between when someone says something's a law and you understand now why it can never be a law. Doesn't matter if it's written on paper. It just can't be.
We have another piece from Will now. Container for Freedom.
Yeah, so this is a really, really important one as well, because it talks about how we can actually experience freedom, what's essential, and then we're going to elaborate on what he means by that. So, this is a critical piece.
So, one of the great things about the Constitution is that it has a transformational effect. So, the very effect of being on a jury is transformational in itself. And there's plenty of studies actually out there to show this as well. It's very deep, very self-reflective. It causes you to draw on our deeper selves. It forces us to confront prejudices, There's a lot of shadow work, if you like, that's going on for jurors when you're carrying out that judgment of your peers, and that is a very deep transformational thing. So the very enacting of our constitution, the taking part within it, you are in effect practicing for anarchy. If we want to use that term properly, you guys will know that the real meaning of the word anarchy is exercising our masterfulness over ourselves. No external rulers. We have to take responsibility and be our own masters in a responsible way. That's what anarchy is being, and that exercising the constitution causes us to have to do that and to do it. So you learn as you go. If we were really to exercise our constitution, we would be constantly improving as a society in morality as well. So that's an important aspect. It's pretty deep. So we're practicing anarchy, I would say, in that respect. I suppose one other thing also to mention, actually, and this is something that I have been bit of a journey that myself I've been on, and with my other half as well, who's very up on law as well. She also talks about this with me a lot, which is that we think that the Constitution is really, in a way, a container for our anarchy to be, because a lot of people have what you might call true anarchists out there. What they want to be, they have this great enthusiasm to be stateless, truly stateless, as in we don't have borders and boundaries to our countries. But increasingly, I'm coming back to this idea of being within a state. Now, whether we call it a state or a nation, the expression of being a country with borders and a nation is actually, in a way, a divine masculine expression, if you like, of the safe space. It's a masculine container. And we're getting into some quite deep stuff here. But it's actually very necessary, I think, that you have those boundaries, those safe masculine boundaries. And the Constitution is an expression of that. And within that, we can be anarchist, truly anarchist in nature. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, he covers a fair bit there. One of the first ones he talks about is in trial by jury, we get to confront our prejudices. So just wanted to elaborate on what that means, is how do we form our prejudices? Are they just inherent in us, or can they be learnt too? So if you grow up, in a domination structure and you are going without needs, you're going to need to create a story as to why you deny those needs. Well, that becomes a prejudice, because that's something you start enforcing on others. Because as soon as you don't get your needs met, and let's just say, for example, your needs for choice, right? So if you're a child and you grow up and you're always told by your parent that they know better than you, what do you know? You're only a child. You can't understand. Like, you're taught from day one. In order for you to survive that, unless you're superhuman, you need to now shut off those needs, because you're dependent on the parent to get your needs for survival met, right? Because you can't look after yourself. So then you have to shut those needs off. Well, they become a prejudice, because then you're going to start now denying those needs in others because they were denied to you. So we've got to really understand what the words prejudice mean and how they form. So they come in two formats. They come in, what's inherent. So if you like vanilla ice cream, for example, that might be something you just have a flavor connection to, where someone might like chocolate. That's one kind of prejudice. But these behavioral prejudices, they are usually taught to us from experience. And so that's when he's saying that, trial by jury gets you to look into how those prejudices came about. You're forced into that position where you need to look into it. That's the only way we can grow and expand, is because most of us are not going to willingly do it. It's too painful.
Yeah.
But when someone else's life is on the line and the quality of their life is dependent on our decision, well, then we're sort of confronted to actually start looking into places we don't like. But that's the true nature of how change is going to happen. So, when he's saying that, that's what he means. And then he talks about boundaries, right? Well, if you think about what natural law is the boundary conditions upon which life can exist. So there's a boundary already, right? Like I explained that last week. You walk in front of a car, you get hit, you're generally not going to survive it that well. That's a boundary condition. You need to be free from high impact for your survival. So same thing with us, our freedom, right? There needs to be a boundary drawn around it. And if the Constitution is doing its job correct, that boundary is that we behave within universal principles of morality. And those who are making decisions that are meant to be on it for our benefit, well, they can only make decisions based upon those principles. That's a boundary, right? So just wanted to give that a bit more clarity of what it means, why boundaries are critical, and to understand the nature of a boundary and what its true purpose is. So we can only experience freedom if people are acting within the boundaries of morality. Otherwise we won't experience it. So the more we stay within those boundaries, the more freedom we actually get to experience.
Container for freedom. A legitimate constitution is an agreement between the people and those acting in service of the people to adhere to the universal principles of morality. Therefore, a constitution allows societies to organize themselves to align with the natural order inherent in creation.
Yeah, so that's like another version of what I just said. It's really straightforward. That for us to understand how to live free, we actually need to know what morality is. And so if we're dominating our children from day one, we're actually behaving immorally. And if we don't even know we're doing it, how are we going to do anything different? And this is about calling these things to our attention. It's critical that we can do that. And whether we like it or not, right? Our prejudices need to be looked into, where they formed, what kind of traumas we suffered that actually brought these prejudices about. It's about being brutally honest with ourselves, because the truth is the only way you're going to heal. There's no other way. If someone can show me a better way, I'd love to see it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Adherence to a legitimate constitution creates the boundary conditions necessary to practice and expand on the limitless nature of freedom and abandonment of the principles contained within a legitimate constitution is the gateway to living in chaos and terror, where warlords and robber barons are rampant.
I just wanted to address some questions. There's some really absurd things being thrown around here. So, Fitz, if your little girl wants to be a boy, should we correct them and let them ride the rainbow? That's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, guys. You don't understand what the word masculine energy means. It doesn't mean being a male that's dominating. You guys just don't understand it. It's just a term given to safety. That's all it means. So you guys have really got to understand what you're hearing. You're not getting it. Okay, they're just different ways to symbolize it. Like feminine energy doesn't mean to be all, dressing up in heels and wearing a frock. That's not what it means. It means care. It means compassion. All right. They're a state of existence. It doesn't belong to doesn't belong to you exclusively if you're a male, or it belongs to you exclusively if you're a female. We have all of those things within us. They're just terms given to express certain ways of being. That's all it means. Yeah. So guys, please stop getting it confused. We've discussed this over and over before. This is not new information. So going back to this container for freedom. So as it says, if we adhere to a legitimate constitution, that's those boundary conditions necessary that we can rely upon so we can practice and expand the limitless nature of freedom, because freedom is limitless. You can't define freedom because it's always in growth and play and expansion. And so if we abandon those principles, right, then all we're doing is we're opening up the door to chaos and terror. And that's where we've been living for thousands of years. And it's just getting worse and worse. And it's until people understand these basic concepts, right, of what it requires, until that's really understood and you accept it in every fiber of your being, we're just going to keep repeating the same trauma cycles. So you can't change anything until you understand it. So the whole purpose of these lessons that we're doing is so you can truly understand how you've been controlled. And it's through a domination structure. And if you don't get rid of the domination structure, nothing's going to happen. Same thing. And if we really want to exercise no loss, no harm, and all that kind of stuff, we have to understand the domination structure, because that can't be in existence. Because while that domination structure is in existence, hierarchy is in existence, there was always going to be loss and harm. There's always going to be fraud. There's always going to be breaches of the peace. Always. It can't be avoided.
So Yvette's going to explain this a little bit more for us.
Yes, I'm looking forward to just getting that little bit deeper as to how we need to accept, every aspect that's in existence before we can do anything about it in a way that's in the service of what we seek. So we cannot deny anything. We need to accept it all.
We have these roles that a domination system will put us into. You're either perpetrator or victim or rescuer. Okay, so domination systems try to divide people into at least 3 roles. You're either bad because you're a perpetrator, you use power bad, or you're a victim. There's nothing you can do. You get victimized by the perpetrators. Then if you're neither of those, then you've got to be the rescuer. You've got to come in and do something and save these people from each other. So there is an illusion when we think that we are one of those roles, right? So tribal community consciousness is, I'm with the perpetrators, or I'm with the victims, or I'm with the rescuers. It is so limiting, and it is an illusion. It is not true. You are all 3. Every single one of us plays all parts. It is an illusion to think that I am only one limited experience.
Wow. Okay.
So if you're going to be on a jury, that's part of your growth and expansion, is to understand that you are all 3. You're never just one. Sometimes you're perpetrator, sometimes you're victim, sometimes you're rescuer. It depends on the context of the situation. And that's what your level of conscious awareness is going to require before you can actually be competent enough to judge anybody else. And so that's what is on offer when you step into a jury, that level of conscious expansion. And so there's no good in us just saying that you're going to do the shadow work. What does shadow work look like? I needed to show you people what it actually looks like, guys. Right? So you understand what the words actually mean, because otherwise you're not going to understand. It's just going to have some intellectual idea in your head. But until you get real clarity on what shadow work is, it's accepting that if someone else can be a perpetrator, so can you. You just haven't been given the conditions in order for you to do the perpetrating. But there will be a time when you will have those conditions and you will do that. And so what makes you qualified to judge anyone else for any of their perpetration until you can accept the ways that you've perpetrated others? This is that full acceptance of the everything. If it exists outside of you, it must exist inside you.
Satanism disintegration. Satanism creates the subtle yet pervasive illusion that life is disconnected and disintegrated. The illusion of separation, us versus them, prevails in satanic systems. The manufactured belief that one's thoughts, actions, and emotions do not affect others because they belong to us, therefore exist in isolation. Hence the commonly held belief of, it's my life and I can do as I say as I damn well please.
So most people would have heard that term. That's one of the best mind control statements you'll ever have. Those people who believe that they can do whatever they like and it doesn't affect anyone else, that's mind control 101. That's them not understanding that all life is connected all the time. There's no such thing as your thoughts, actions, and emotions staying in isolation. It's not possible, because we are all different expressions of the one life force that we all connected. That's why we have the same understanding of conscience. Like I did a thought experiment not long ago where I asked a bunch of people to imagine that they were sitting around in a circle and witnessing an activity where there was cheating in place, right? And then I asked the question, how many people in this room would be like excited and overjoyed to witness the cheating? And without any thought, the answer universally was no. There was no opinions launched there. It was just them going on their feeling. And I said, well, what did it feel like when you imagine the cheating, right? And there was things like, well, we felt repulsed, revolted. These are just inherent intelligences activated within us. Yeah. And so if we don't understand why we have emotions and how they're actually there to be in service of us, then we're going to be controlled by them. And so that's why the idea of, when we put thoughts into people's minds that they themselves haven't put there, and they're through a language, well, that's going to stimulate certain emotions to get them to act against themselves, because they haven't looked at the thoughts. They haven't really, really investigated, how do these thoughts get in my mind? Have I been manipulated? Most people don't do that work. So this is what's on the table here, guys. So actually start looking further than you've ever looked before.
Here's Yvette with a little bit more to explain.
Yes, she does another.
To think that I am only one limited experience. When it comes to parenting my child, I tend to go a little more perpetrator. Okay? I tend to do more power over. I tend to do more my way and the highway. I'm working on it. But that is the consciousness that I find welling up in me, a power over consciousness. When I'm working with people who terrify me, I go victim. Oh, I don't want to say anything. They're so bad. They're so abusive. They attack people. They're offensive. They insult people. I'm so little. I can't do anything. I just want to be safe around them. They victimize and hurt me and others. And then a lot of my life, I feel like I'm playing rescuer. Let me get my attention off of all the issues of my life and let me focus instead on yours. Because I don't know what to do about the issues in my own life, but I know what to do for yours. So if I can come in and give you lots of good advice and perspective and education, then I want to see you go out there and fix things, and then maybe vicariously something in my life will fix back here too, right? Okay. So that's just a small example of there's a shift from saying that's not me to saying, oh, that is also me. And if we want to have an expanded sense of community in this world, there is an invitation that I'm going to make of you that you begin going, oh, that is me too. I know that experience. I know the experience of a child. I know the experience of a student. I know the experience of perpetration.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really
so
well
again,
explained.
yeah, and unfortunately, my version keeps breaking down, so I'm hoping everyone on the other end, you've seen it without a break. So I can only remember aspects of it. So what I recall her saying is that if we want to actually grow, expand, and live that life of freedom, we need to accept the all. Everything that exists outside of us can only exist outside of us first if it exists inside of us. So we need to accept that if it can happen outside, it can happen inside. And so we incorporate it all. We do not deny anything. We accept it all. And only then can we be in a position to actually give care to one another. And that's what can be gained in a jury, is you are doing that. If others can be perpetrator, I too can. So how am I going to judge them harshly if I myself would not like those consequences handed to me? Do I want to be defined by one moment in time?
Yeah.
Does that make me, is that everything I am by that one moment? You know, how many of us are perfect? I mean, it goes back to that statement, and I'm not the best at quoting religious texts, but there is a message in this one, and that is, he who is without sin be the first to be the one to cast the first stone, or something like that. Well, that's what that's saying in there. Before you can actually launch anything at anybody, you got to look in your own glass house first, right? And you got to take a proper look, and that's what we're doing. We're looking at ourselves, but not from a position of self-hating, because that's what we're taught to do. From day one, when we're taught we're bad because we don't live up to someone else's expectations, we start hating ourselves. You know, so that's who becomes the police. These people who are self-haters, because they're taught from day one that they're not good enough. You know, so then they're looking for a new family that will accept them, where they will belong. You know, and then once they get that acceptance and their belonging, they'll do anything for that family, even if it means violating others. That's the nature of what they've set the police up to be. You know, so these are really broken individuals. Unfortunately, they've taken an oath to do what? To act under the universal principles of morality. And they're in breach of that oath willfully. So that puts them in a whole different category of being assessed and judged. So they don't get to be judged the same way that we do. That's the sad part of it all for them.
All right, love integration. Love consciousness never seeks to deny anything, as denial comes from separation control energy. Universal love is the capacity to accept all with the willingness to integrate with whatever exists outside of you as being part of you.
Yeah, so pretty much I just said that a moment ago, so I don't really need to have any more to say on that one. I reckon that was already covered.
Beautiful. Well, if that's that one covered, that leads us to our last video of this evening, another one from Yvette.
Yeah, so she'll tie it up really well here.
Okay.
The moment that you try to get a group or a voice or a perspective subdued, fragmented out, not important, not included, not seen, not heard, the moment you vilify a group, it will go underground for a while and you'll think it's not there. But it will start getting all kinds of power, and it will come up to be seen, to be heard, to be witnessed. And the invitation that I'm giving you today is to be loved, to be transformed, to be included, to say, oh, I can find that place in me too. I'm not that different. We get into a sense of shared humanity, because the kind of community consciousness that I think we need in this world is one in which human beings are not turning on one another and are not enjoying hurting one another. And then the very final stage of development is when we get into the sense of experiencing ourselves as spiritual beings who are actually at one. We get into this experience of oneness. Many people who meditate speak of getting to that place where you start dropping all those attachments and you just feel the sense of connectedness with source energy, with divine energy, with life energy, whatever language works for you. But it is a place that you get to where you've transcended the suffering and you are at one with it. A little caveat on the word transcend. I hear that word used to mean spiritual bypass of being a human being. And I'm not talking about a spiritual bypass. When I talk about transcend, I want you to hear of it as transcend and include. So I'm still suffering. There is still pain. I still get annoyed with the traffic. I am all of this. And I can still experience a sense of oneness and love and compassion in the world within which I live. It doesn't need to fragment me. But that is the experience of including difference, of including humanity. And too often I hear people who want to use things like meditation to somehow not be human anymore, to somehow jump out of their bodies and then just have this energetic experience, and because they don't know what to do with all this chaotic messiness, so they think that the answer is to just jump out. So that's not my approach. You certainly can try that. I'd love to hear how that works. It seems to be one of those places where it comes back to people in subversive ways later. But I'm really talking about enjoying the animal nature of yourself, enjoying the differences, enjoying the complexity, learning to enjoy the conflict, and joining one another in that process and not fragmenting out. Okay? It's not this group against that group. That consciousness will keep you divided.
Couldn't agree more. Agree.
So I'm hoping that's sort of helping. Like, some people have been confusing letting people off the hook, things they do that are not okay. They're thinking that that's what the jury's for. And I'm hoping that's going to help understand that when we're dealing with one another, our neighbors, we're seeing ourselves in them. Now we're separating that from those who are in a position of decision making, right? They run under a whole separate set of rules because they take an oath. So that's a more black and white experience for them, because we can't have those who are acting in the service of others breaching that trust. So that has a special set of consequences and a special set of conditions for them. So that's a separate issue, right? So the one who made the comment about Dan Andrews, I'm meant to transcend him. No, they're made accountable to the people because they're in a position of trust to make decisions on our behalf, and they've breached that trust. So that has to be played out. That contract has to be executed, because if we don't show that we're serious about fulfilling that contract, all we've done is we've invited every other future psychopath to show up and carry on doing what the ones previous to them have done. That's what the message we're sending. So we need to execute that contract. There's only one. So if you are a bit confused as to how this all links to Article 61, 1215 Magna Carta, I'm hoping that that's helping. So that's why we do that notice process, because that notice process is evidence of their criminality, of them stepping outside the boundaries of the principles of morality. And that's the only way they can be in service. As soon as they've stepped outside of those principles, they are not in service anymore. They are dominating us. And that has never been given a grant of authority by anyone, ever. And that means they are now accountable in their private and unlimited capacity for the crimes they've committed. That's a separate set of circumstances that is the context of what they're involved in. Now, that's different to what you and I as neighbors, because we're being dominated, right? So we've got to work through our trauma and use each other as our actual healing guides. That's we've got to start looking at it that way when we're bringing each other in front of someone to be judged. But if you're in a position of decision making, that's a whole set of separate rules, and that's covered in the notice process, right? And every time they ignore it, they are more accountable. So if that doesn't help understand why we do this lawful process, I'm hoping this does.
Got some Q&As.
Yes, so just wanted to show some of the things that we cover in the recently updated frequently Q&A questions. So these are some of the ones we covered just on police. So these are quite common questions that we've seen pop up in the group. So if people want to get these things answered, if you wanted to run through the questions, Carl, just quickly.
Sure, I can do that. Are you obliged to let police on your property? Are you obliged to let police into your home? Are you entitled to video? What's the best way to remind police of their obligations and oath? Do I need to display a sign on my property or front door that I'm standing under MC 1215? What if you live in a multi-communal premises like unit townhouse and someone else lets the police onto the property? Do I step outside to talk to them, or is it best to stay behind a screen door or the door threshold? What do I do or say if I get arrested? What do I do or say if I get questioned? Am I entitled to record? What do I do or say if the police turn up with a warrant? What makes a warrant legitimate? What do I do if I get pulled over and police ask to see my driver's license? Do I have to step out of the car?
Yeah, so these are just the section on police that we've put together. So if people have ever had any of these questions, they can find them in our Q&As in the Telegram group. So hopefully there's an icon that I've sent you that shows what the Telegram group looks like. That's it. So yeah, the quickest way to do it, guys, is to go to vofhq.com, click on Magna Carta 1215, and you'll see this icon sitting there, and just click on that, and that'll take you straight into the group, guys. Like I said many times, the group is not for discussing the why we got here or the problems we're having, all this off-topic stuff. It's not for that. It's for you being self-disciplined to actually find out how to activate the remedy and find people in your local area who may be willing to assist you and act as supports for you. That's what the group's for. So we are self-disciplined in that way. We're not here to discuss things that are outside of that. We all know what the problems are. We don't need another lesson in that. So when you do join the group, guys, understand that that's its purpose. And if you start posting off topic, you'll be given a warning. And if you ignore it, then you're going to be made to leave. So it just needs those boundary conditions, just like nature has its own, right? Those boundary conditions need to be held to in order for us to fulfill our purpose. So just making that clear, guys. So when you do join the group, it's not for other reasons other than to activate the remedy and find others to support you to do that. And the group is very supportive for that. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, that's lesson number 21, run and done, my friend. Thank you very much. Another very interesting lesson, I thought.
Yeah, no, I'm pleased. I finally got that one out, guys, because I did want to show the connection of the previous weeks we've done as to if people haven't understood why we did the one on competitive sports, the one we did on police. You can see how it's all tying together, and it all starts from a beginning point, and that's how we're dominated from day one in our birth families and the mentality that they've been running under without them realizing it. And they're actually doing the devil's work without knowing it. And remember, if anyone's watched any of Mark Passier's work, he says it, that the majority of people are acting out Satanism without even knowing they're doing it. And so hopefully this explains how it's done to us and why we're actually creating our own suffering and doing the work for our masters.
Yeah, it's very sad. Looking forward to lesson number 22 next week.
Yep. So just thank you, everyone who's been in the commenting tonight. There's been a few that have grabbed my attention, so I'm pleased that you're able to contribute. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week for lesson 22.
Cheers, mate. You have a safe week.
Likewise, my friend. Good night, everyone.
Cheers. And folks, back again tomorrow with another show, and trying to get Patriot 101 on tomorrow night, along with Mr. Ambrose, the Scotch maker extraordinaire. Or I wouldn't say Scotch, let me just say whiskey maker extraordinaire. So we'll see if we can't get the two boys on from down south tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then. If you are out on the roads, be safe, folks. Don't be one of those dickheads.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!